You wake slowly, not because of noise, but because of its absence, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, as if the air itself has learned to hold its breath. For a moment, you lie still, listening for something familiar, a voice, a cart rolling over stone, the distant sound of work beginning. Nothing comes, only the faint sound of your own breathing, steady and careful, as though the world might shatter if you breathe too loudly. When you open your eyes, the light is pale and thin, slipping through a small window that looks older than you remember. Dust floats lazily in the beam, drifting without purpose. The room smells of cold wood and old straw. Your body feels stiff, sore in places that never quite seem to heal anymore. This is the kind of tiredness that doesn't disappear with sleep. It lives deep in the bones, earned through days that ask more from you than you can easily give. You sit up slowly, letting the dizziness pass. Beneath you is a straw mattress, rough but thick enough to soften the floor. There was a time when you slept directly on the ground, wrapped in whatever cloth you could find. Now there is a mattress, uneven and scratchy, but undeniably yours. Survival has changed what comfort means. It is no longer softness or luxury, but simply the absence of pain. As you swing your legs over the side of the bed, your feet touch wooden floorboards. Real wood, worn smooth by years of footsteps that are no longer there. The house is larger than the one you were born into. You know its history even if you try not to think about it. It belonged to another family once. They lived here together, laughed here, argued here, and then, within days, they were gone. Like so many others, the house remained, waiting for whoever was left to need it. You pull a tunic over your head, wool instead of the rough hemp you once wore. It fits properly, hangs comfortably on your shoulders. The warmth is immediate, reassuring and unsettling all at once. You don't ask where it came from. Everyone knows where things come from now. Objects have longer lives than people, and they move quietly from one pair of hands to another. Outside the window, the morning air looks cold. When you step outside, your breath forms small clouds that vanish as quickly as they appear. The village stretches out before you, or what remains of it. Houses stand unevenly, some occupied, many not. Doors hang open, roofs sag, fences lean at awkward angles. Nature has begun the slow work of reclaiming what people left behind. Weeds push through paths that once saw constant use. Gardens grow wild without anyone to guide them. Before the great sickness, this place had been alive from dawn until nightfall. You remember the sound of voices calling across the square, the rhythm of tools striking wood and stone, the laughter of children running without fear. Now movement is rare. Those who remain move with purpose, conserving energy, speaking only when necessary. Every sound feels louder against the quiet. Every footstep a reminder of how empty things have become. You walk carefully, passing buildings that feel more like memories than structures. Some still bear marks scratched into their doors, symbols left during the worst days when people hoped signs might protect them. Others are simply abandoned, their contents taken long ago by those who survived. Nothing is wasted anymore. Waste is a luxury of crowded worlds. Your stomach tightens, a dull ache that has become familiar. Hunger is no longer dramatic or sharp, it is constant, patient. Food exists, but not always where or when you need it. Fields stretch beyond the village, wide and underworked. There is land enough for everyone who remains, but hands are few. Grain grows in uneven patches, and much of it is left unharvested. bending back into the soil. As you walk, you pass the well. The rope is frayed, the bucket worn thin. Once, there would have been a line here, neighbours talking while they waited their turn. Now the well stands alone like a forgotten monument. Everything requires maintenance now. Roads, tools, buildings, even traditions. With fewer people, every task feels larger, heavier, more urgent. Yet beneath the exhaustion there is something else, a strange awareness that the rules have shifted. You are still poor, still working harder than you would like, but the world no longer presses down in the same way. There are choices now, small ones, quiet ones, but real all the same. No one says this out loud. It feels almost disrespectful to acknowledge it, but it exists, undeniable as the empty spaces between houses. You pause, looking across the village. The silence is still there, but it no longer feels entirely hostile. It is the silence of something resting, not dead, just deeply changed. Birds move through the air above you, unbothered by history. The sun climbs slowly, indifferent to what it shines upon. Life continues, not boldly, not joyfully, but steadily. This is what survival looks like in the aftermath. Not celebration, not relief, but persistence. Waking each day in a world that endured something unimaginable and continues anyway. You take another breath, deeper this time, and step forward into the morning, carrying both what was lost and what remains. The silence is not immediate. It reveals itself slowly, in layers, the longer you remain still. At first, it feels like peace, the kind you might have once wished for after a long day of labour. But as minutes pass, the silence grows heavier, pressing inward. It is the absence of familiar rhythms that unsettles you most. The world is awake, yet it does not sound alive. You walk through paths that once echoed with routine. Every village had its own music once, footsteps at dawn, animals stirring, voices rising and falling as people greeted one another without thinking. Now those sounds exist only in memory. The air holds no chatter, no argument, no laughter drifting from open doors. It feels as though the village itself is listening, waiting for something that never arrives. Buildings stand close together, yet feel impossibly distant. Windows stare outward, unblinking. Some are shuttered tight, others broken and open to the weather. Inside, dust gathers patiently on surfaces that were once touched daily. Tables remain where meals were eaten, benches pushed back slightly, as if someone meant to return shortly. Time stopped here once, and then moved on without taking these places with it. You pause near what used to be the busiest corner of the village. The square looks larger now, not because it grew, but because fewer people occupy it. Stone beneath your feet is worn smooth by generations who crossed it without ever imagining it could one day feel so empty. The well stands at the centre, unchang, ed in shape, but altered in meaning. It no longer gathers people. It simply exists. Silence has a way of amplifying small things. The creak of a loose board sounds louder than it should. A distant bird call feels intrusive, almost out of place. Wind moves through tall grass at the edge of the village, producing a soft whisper that carries farther than it once did. Every sound arrives alone, unsupported by others, and fades just as quickly. There are moments when the quiet feels respectful, like a collective pause taken too long to break. Other times it feels accusatory, as if the village itself is asking why you are still here when so many are not. You have no answer for that question. No one does. Survival was never evenly distributed, never fair, never explained. You pass by homes that remained sealed, their doors never reopened after the sickness came through. Some families locked themselves inside, hoping isolation would save them. Others fled, leaving everything behind. The silence clings to these houses more tightly than to others. It feels thicker there, almost physical, as if it has weight. In places where children once played, grass grows taller than it should. Paths that were worn by small running feet are fading, edges softening with every passing season. Toys lie half buried in soil, wood splitting, paint long gone. They are not reminders meant to hurt, but they do, not sharply, quietly. You realize that silence is not the same everywhere. Near the fields it feels wide and open. Near abandoned homes it feels closed and heavy. Inside buildings it settles low, pressing against walls and ceilings. Outside it stretches, filling spaces where voices once travelled easily. It reshapes itself depending on where you stand. There are fewer bells now, fewer reasons to ring them. Church bells once marked time clearly, morning, noon, evening, celebration, warning. Now they ring rarely, carefully, as if afraid to disturb what little calm remains. When they do sound, the echo lingers longer than before, bouncing off empty spaces and returning altered, thinner. People speak softly when they speak at all, not out of fear, but habit. Loudness feels wrong in a world that has lost so much. Conversations are practical, brief, and often unfinished. Words are chosen carefully, as though there is a limited supply. Silence fills the spaces between sentences without apology. Even animals behave differently. Dogs roam without purpose, no longer guarding specific homes. Livestock wander through broken fences, grazing where they please. Birds nest in places that were once too busy for them. Life continues, but it rearranges itself, adapting to quieter conditions. At night, the silence deepens further. Without many hearths burning, darkness settles quickly. The absence of light feels connected to the absence of sound. You lie awake sometimes, listening to nothing, and it feels louder than any noise ever did. Thoughts surface uninvited in such stillness. Memories, regrets, questions with no answers. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, people begin to learn how to exist within this quiet. Silence becomes something to move through rather than fight against. It becomes a companion, unwelcome but constant. You learn to hear what remains, the wind, the birds, the sound of your own steps, and to accept that these are enough. For now, the silence does not mean the end of life. It means life has changed its volume. What once shouted now whispers. What once crowded now leaves space. And within that space, people continue to breathe, to walk, to endure. The village stands, quieter than before, but not entirely empty. Silence lives here now, woven into everything, shaping the days that follow. The houses stand quietly, doors neither fully open nor entirely closed, as if unsure what they are meant to be now. You move past them slowly, aware that each one holds more than empty rooms. They hold the weight of lives interrupted, routines broken, stories left unfinished. After the sickness passed through, these homes did not disappear. They remained, waiting, patient and indifferent. When people returned or emerged or simply realized they were still alive, they found themselves surrounded by spaces that no longer belonged to anyone in particular. Ownership became a strange concept. There were no proper ceremonies, no formal exchanges. If a house stood empty long enough, Someone eventually moved in, not out of greed but necessity. Shelter was shelter, and grief did not keep out the cold. You step inside one such house. The air is stale, unmoving, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and old ash. Light filters in through cracks in the shutters, illuminating a room that looks as though it was abandoned mid-thought. A table still sits near the hearth. A stool lies on its side, as if someone meant to pick it up later. That later never came. There is no excitement in discovering these places, only a quiet, careful acceptance. You learn quickly not to imagine the final moments of those who lived here before. Curiosity brings nothing but heaviness. Instead, you focus on what remains useful. A cooking pot still hangs above the fire. It bears marks from years of use, soot layered thick at its base. You take it down, clean it, and it becomes part of your daily life. Beds are claimed in the same way. Straw mattresses are shaken out, replaced, reused. Blankets are folded, aired, and laid down again. There is comfort in these small acts of renewal, though it comes with a low hum of unease. You sleep more warmly now, but your rest is never entirely peaceful. Objects remember their past even if you try not to. Clothing fills chests and cupboards, often better than what you once owned. Wool instead of coarse fibres, proper stitching instead of hurried repairs. You wear garments that fit better, feel softer, last longer. It is an improvement that feels undeserved, not because you didn't work hard enough, but because someone else had to disappear for it to be possible. Houses themselves feel larger than they should. Families once filled them with movement, conversation, conflict. Now a single person occupies spaces meant for many. Rooms go unused, doors remain closed. Footsteps echo in hallways that were never meant to echo. You begin to understand how space can feel oppressive when it is too empty. Some people move walls, block off rooms, or convert living spaces into storage. Others leave everything exactly as it was, afraid that changing too much would erase what little remains of the past. There is no right way to inhabit these inherited lives. Everyone carries it differently. In villages and towns alike, entire streets stand partially occupied. A house with smoke rising from its chimney may sit between two that will never again feel warmth from a hearth. At night, lanterns glow sporadically, scattered rather than continuous. Darkness fills the gaps, deep and uninterrupted. With inheritance comes responsibility. Roofs leak, beams rot, floors sag. The labour required to maintain these structures is constant. Before, many hands shared the burden. Now one or two must manage what once required dozens. Houses outlive their owners, but they do not care who keeps them standing. There is also the inheritance of tools. Farming implements, carpentry tools, kitchen utensils, all scattered, all reused. You pick up a tool and feel how worn its handle is, shaped by hands that no longer exist. It fits yours easily, as though it has been waiting. Work continues, not because the past demands it, but because survival does. Sometimes you find things that cannot be used. A child's carved toy, a small shoe, a ribbon tucked carefully away. These items are left where they are. No one wants them, yet no one wants to throw them away. They become part of the house itself, absorbed into its quiet presence. As time passes, the sense of trespass fades slightly. These spaces become familiar. You learn where the floor creaks, which windows let in the most light, where the warmth lingers longest in winter. The house begins to respond to you, not with affection, but with tolerance. It allows you to live within it. Still, there are moments when you catch yourself lowering your voice indoors, even when alone, as if someone might be listening, as if speaking too loudly would disturb what remains of those who came before. It is not fear exactly, but respect mixed with habit. Inherited lives reshape the survivors. People become quieter, more reflective. They handle belongings gently, aware that everything has already outlasted someone once. Waste feels wrong. Excess feels uncomfortable. Even comfort is approached cautiously. Empty homes slowly become lived-in homes again. Not restored to what they were, but adapted, changed, scarred, yet functional. Within their walls, new routines form. Meals are cooked, sleep is taken, days are endured. The past does not vanish. It settles into the corners, into the grain of wood, into the rhythm of daily life. And within these borrowed spaces, people continue, carrying forward what was left behind, not as replacement, but as continuation. The world feels smaller now, not because the land has changed, but because there are fewer people to move through it. Paths once worn smooth by countless footsteps now grow uneven, grass pushing through cracks where boots once passed daily. Distance feels longer when there are fewer voices along the way. Every task requires more effort, more time, more of what little energy remains. Work begins early, as it always has, but it no longer feels shared. Before, labour had rhythm, fields filled with movement, hands working side by side, tools rising and falling in familiar patterns. Now, a single figure may stand where several once did. The land waits patiently, indifferent to how many are left to tend it. You step into the fields and see how uneven the work has become. Some patches grow thick and tall, while others remain untouched, weeds reclaiming what grain never reached. There is more land than there are hands, and no way to give attention to all of it. Choices must be made. Some areas are abandoned without ceremony, allowed to return to wilderness quietly. The soil is still fertile, the seasons still turn, nature has not forgotten how to grow, but without enough people to guide it, much of what could be produced simply isn't. Harvests are smaller, not because the earth refuses to give, but because no one is there to take what it offers. Tools wear down faster now. A broken handle or dull blade once meant inconvenience. Now it can mean days of delay. Repairs take longer because everything else demands attention too. There is no surplus of labour, no one waiting idly to assist. Everyone who remains is already stretched thin. Villages rely heavily on cooperation, though it looks different than before. There is no abundance of manpower, but there is necessity. People help when they can, not out of obligation but understanding. A fence repaired together, a roof patched before winter arrives. These efforts are quieter than they once were, but no less important. Work days blur together. Without crowds or noise to mark time, progress feels slower. You measure days by aches in your body rather than by events. Muscles grow tired in new ways, pushed beyond what they were used to. Rest is brief and practical. There is always more to do than time allows. Animals become more valuable, not just for food, but for labour. Oxen and horses take on heavier roles, compensating where people cannot. Caring for them becomes a priority. Their health is tied directly to survival. A sick animal is more than a loss. It is a setback felt across an entire household. Inside workshops and barns, fewer fires burn. Crafts that once thrived slow down or disappear entirely, not because they are no longer needed, but because those who knew how to practice them are gone. Skills vanish quietly, taking generations of knowledge with them. What remains is simplified, focused on what is essential. Maintenance becomes the central task of life. Roads crumble, bridges weaken, buildings decay. Nothing maintains itself, and there are never enough hands to keep everything from falling into disrepair. People learn to accept imperfection. Leaning walls stay standing. Uneven floors remain uneven. Survival replaces refinement. Despite the exhaustion, there is a strange shift in how work is valued. Labor carries weight now. Each pair of hands matters. Those who can work are needed, and they know it. There is less shouting, less commanding. Tasks are discussed rather than demanded. Authority softens when it depends so directly on cooperation. Payment changes too, though slowly. Food, shelter, and goods move more freely between people. Barter becomes common. Promises are taken seriously. Trust, fragile as it is, becomes a form of currency. Without it, nothing functions. The smaller world requires adaptability. People take on roles they never imagined. Farmers learn basic repairs. Laborers tend animals. Everyone becomes a little of everything, not by choice but necessity. Pride gives way to practicality. What matters is that the work gets done. There are moments of quiet satisfaction hidden within the strain. A field partially harvested still provides. A repaired tool holds together for another season. A shared task strengthens bonds between those who remain. These moments are small, fleeting, but meaningful. As the sun sets each day, exhaustion settles deeply. Bodies carry the weight of work long after it ends. Yet, mornings still come, and with them, the need to begin again. The smaller world does not allow for rest in the way the old one did. It demands persistence above all else. Working harder becomes normal. It is not questioned, not resisted. It is simply how life continues. In this reduced world, effort fills the spaces left behind, and through steady, uncelebrated labor, the days move forward one task at a time. Hunger is no longer a sharp pain that arrives suddenly and leaves when fed. It has become something quieter, more patient. It settles in early and stays, a constant companion that reminds you of itself with a dull pressure rather than urgency. You wake with it, work alongside it, and fall asleep knowing it will be there again in the morning. Meals are simpler now, measured carefully. Bread is sliced thinner. Porridge is stretched with water. What once would have been considered barely enough is now routine. There is no ceremony around eating, no excess to celebrate. Food is fuel, nothing more, and every bite is taken with awareness rather than pleasure. Cold follows hunger closely, especially as seasons change. Houses once warmed by many bodies now struggle to hold heat. Hearths burn less often. Wood saved for nights when the chill becomes unavoidable. You learn to layer clothing, to sleep closer to the fire when it exists, to accept the numbness in your fingers as temporary and manageable. Winter arrives earlier in the body than it does on the calendar. Bones feel it first, joints stiffen, movements slow. The cold is not dramatic, not cruel, but persistent. It seeps into walls, floors, and clothing, making itself known in small, steady ways. You stop fighting it and begin planning around it. Survival becomes a routine built from repetition. Wake, eat what there is. Work until the body signals its limits. Rest briefly. Eat again if possible. Sleep. The days blend together, distinguished only by weather and the gradual wearing down of tools and people alike. There is comfort in routine, even when it is harsh. Predictability offers stability in a world that has lost so much. You know what the day will ask of you, even if you don't always know how you will meet its demands. The structure keeps despair at bay. It leaves little room for reflection. Water must be fetched, fires tended, food prepared with care. Every task has weight. Nothing feels small anymore. A spilled pot of grain is not an inconvenience, but a loss felt deeply. Waste becomes unthinkable. Everything is reused, repaired, repurposed until it can no longer serve. The body adapts in subtle ways. Hunger becomes easier to tolerate, though never comfortable. Cold teaches efficiency of movement, conserving warmth. Sleep grows deeper, heavier, pulled from exhaustion rather than ease. Dreams are shorter, often forgotten by morning. Clothing is worn until it thins, then patched again. Shoes are repaired repeatedly, soles reinforced with whatever material can be found. Bare feet are avoided whenever possible, not out of modesty, but survival. Even minor injuries can become serious in such conditions. Illness is feared quietly, with fewer healers and limited remedies. Sickness carries uncertainty. People watch one another closely for signs of weakness, offering help when possible, distance when necessary. Care exists, but caution shapes it. Despite scarcity, there is sharing, not abundance, but balance. Someone with extra bread offers a piece. Someone with firewood gives a bundle before nightfall. These exchanges are rarely discussed. They happen without ceremony, driven by understanding rather than generosity. Cold nights bring people closer together indoors, not in conversation, but proximity. Silence fills rooms as bodies gather for warmth. The crackle of a small fire becomes a focal point, its light flickering across tired faces. Words are few, presence is enough. Outside, the land rests uneasily. Fields lie quiet, frost settling over soil that will soon need tending again. Hunger reminds everyone that spring must come, whether they are ready or not. Survival depends on endurance through the waiting. The routine continues even when spirits waver. There is no pause for grief, no space carved out for reflection. Loss is carried alongside work, folded into the rhythm of daily life. You learn to move with it rather than against it. Over time, the routine shapes identity. You become someone who survives not through strength or courage, but persistence. Hunger and cold are no longer enemies to defeat, but conditions to manage. They shape decisions, pace, and expectations. There are small moments of relief, a meal that fills the stomach a little more than usual, a night when the fire lasts until morning, a day when the sun offers warmth unexpectedly. These moments do not erase hardship, but they soften it. Survival is not heroic here. It is quiet, repetitive, and often unnoticed. It happens in kitchens, fields, and cold rooms where people continue because stopping is not an option. Hunger returns, cold deepens, and still the routine holds. In this steady cycle, life continues. Not boldly, not comfortably, but persistently. And in the repetition of these days, people endure, carrying forward not hope exactly, but the determination to see another morning. The changes do not arrive loudly. There are no announcements, no formal declarations that the world has shifted. Instead, the old rules begin to loosen quietly, like knots worn smooth by time. People notice it not in speeches or laws, but in small moments that feel unfamiliar at first. Before, Roles were fixed, inherited like the land itself. You were born into your place and expected to remain there. The boundaries were clear, reinforced daily by custom and authority. After the great loss, those boundaries blur, not because anyone planned it, but because the old structure can no longer hold its shape. There are fewer workers now, and that absence changes everything. Hands are needed everywhere. Fields, workshops, homes, all require labour. And there are not enough people to meet the demand. Those who can work find themselves valued in new ways. Requests replace commands. Negotiation replaces assumption. You notice it when someone asks rather than orders. When a task comes with an offer instead of a threat. These moments feel strange, almost uncomfortable. Respect is not spoken of openly, but it begins to appear in how people address one another. Wages slowly improve, though they are rarely discussed in those terms. Payment may come as food, shelter, or shared resources. What matters is that labour now carries weight. Refusal becomes possible in ways it never was before. People still need work, but they are no longer entirely replaceable. Landowners struggle to maintain control over empty fields. Land without workers produces nothing. Power, once tied tightly to ownership, begins to shift toward those who can make the land useful. Agreements change, expectations soften, survival forces compromise where authority once stood firm. Villages govern themselves differently now. Decisions are made out of necessity rather than tradition. When something needs to be done, whoever is capable steps forward. Leadership emerges quietly, based on reliability rather than title. Those who organize repairs or coordinate shared labor gain influence without asking for it. Old hierarchies do not vanish completely. Some people cling to them, repeating habits that no longer fit the world as it is. But those habits grow weaker with each passing season. Respect flows toward usefulness, fairness, and consistency rather than inherited rank. The church remains, but its role shifts as well. With fewer congregations and quieter services, its authority feels less absolute. People still seek comfort there, still mark time by its rituals, but they also rely more on one another. Guidance comes from shared experience as much as from doctrine. Women find their roles changing too, though not evenly or easily. With fewer men available for labour, women take on responsibilities once denied to them. Fields are tended, trades are practiced, decisions are made out of necessity. These changes are rarely acknowledged openly, but they persist. Children grow up differently in this altered order. They see adults negotiating rather than obeying blindly. They learn that survival depends on adaptability. Lessons come from observation rather than instruction. The world teaches them quietly that nothing is as fixed as it once seemed. Justice becomes practical rather than ceremonial. Disputes are settled quickly, often by community consensus. There is little patience for drawn-out conflict. Everyone depends on everyone else too much for resentment to linger long. Forgiveness becomes a form of efficiency. Even language shifts subtly. People speak with less formality, fewer titles. Names are used more often. Distance between social positions narrows in conversation, if not entirely in circumstance. The tone of interaction becomes more human, less rigid. This new order does not feel like freedom exactly. It feels like adjustment, like a system held together by necessity rather than belief. People accept it because it works, not because it is ideal. Stability matters more than perfection. There is also unease beneath these changes. Those who once held unquestioned authority feel uncertain. Those newly valued feel the weight of expectation. Change brings opportunity, but also responsibility. Nothing feels guaranteed anymore. Over time, these shifts settle into habit. What once felt strange becomes normal. Children grow into adults who accept this arrangement without question. The memory of how things used to be fades, replaced by a quieter understanding of how things now function. The social order reshapes itself not through rebellion, but through absence, through loss that forced adaptation, through a world that could no longer afford rigidity. It becomes less defined by birth and more by presence, effort, and reliability. Life continues within this changed structure, steady and unremarkable. People work, share, negotiate, and endure. The world does not announce its transformation. It simply lives it day by day, quietly rewriting the rules as it goes. Life does not return all at once. It arrives quietly, almost cautiously, as if unsure whether it is truly welcome back. There is no single moment when people realize that things are improving. Instead, there are small signs, easy to miss if you are not paying attention. It begins with routines feeling less fragile. The days still follow the same pattern, but they no longer feel as though they might collapse at any moment. Work continues, hunger remains, cold still comes and goes, yet there is a subtle steadiness beneath it all. The world feels less like it is holding its breath. You notice it first in the land. Fields that once lay half forgotten begin to show more order. Furrows grow straighter. Weeds are pulled more consistently. Not all the land is reclaimed, but enough of it is tended to suggest intention rather than desperation. The earth responds slowly, offering modest harvests that are met with quiet relief. People begin to plan again, though they rarely call it that. Seeds are set aside deliberately. Repairs are made not just to survive the season, but to last into the next one. Roofs are reinforced instead of merely patched. Tools are cared for with a thought toward the future rather than the immediate task. Homes change too. The emptiness within them softens. Unused rooms find purpose, even if only for storage or sheltering animals in winter. Hearths are lit more often. Smoke rises a little more regularly into the sky, thin but steady, a sign that life continues inside. Conversations last slightly longer. Words are still chosen carefully, but there is less hesitation in speaking. People share observations, small plans, quiet hopes, without immediately dismissing them. Laughter does not return easily, but when it does appear, it feels genuine, unforced. Children become more visible. Their presence is cautious at first, closely watched, but gradually more natural. They learn the altered world as their normal, unaware of how different it once was. Their footsteps carve new paths into the ground, lighter and less burdened by memory. Markets, where they exist, grow slowly busier, not crowded, not lively, but functional. Goods change hands more frequently. Simple items appear again. Small comforts, modest tools, bits of colour woven into cloth. Trade does not flourish, but it moves, and movement matters. Rituals return in subdued forms. Gatherings are smaller, quieter, but they happen. People mark time together again, even if briefly. These moments do not erase loss. but they create continuity. Life becomes something shared, not just endured alone. There is still grief, always present, but it no longer dominates every thought. Memories settle into the background, no longer demanding constant attention. People carry their losses with them, rather than standing still beneath their weight. The dead remain remembered, but the living begin to matter again too. Nature plays its part, indifferent yet generous. Seasons continue without pause. Spring arrives as it always has, green and persistent. It does not ask who survived or who was lost. It simply grows. This constancy becomes comforting, a reminder that some things remain reliable even when everything else changes. Trust rebuilds quietly. People rely on one another not just out of necessities, but familiarity. Promises are kept more often than broken. Cooperation becomes habit rather than exception. These bonds are not celebrated, but they hold communities together more firmly than before. The pace of life remains slow. No one rushes toward ambition or expansion. The memory of loss tempers desire. Growth happens cautiously, one step at a time. People have learned what can happen when too much is taken for granted. Work begins to feel purposeful rather than endless. Tasks still demand effort, but they no longer feel entirely futile. The results, however modest, last longer. A repaired wall stands through multiple seasons. A planted field produces again. These outcomes build quiet confidence. There is no illusion that the world has returned to what it was. Everyone understands that clearly. The old world is gone, not waiting somewhere to be recovered. What exists now is something different, smaller, quieter, more aware of its own fragility. Yet within this awareness, life finds space to grow. People marry again, not grandly but simply. Children are born into a world shaped by caution and care. Homes shelter families once more, even if those families look different than before. Time smooths the sharpest edges. Stories of the sickness shift from personal memories to shared history. They are told less often and with less immediacy. The fear they once carried fades, replaced by understanding. Life does not triumph dramatically. It resumes. It settles. It adapts. It learns where to bend and where to hold firm. In doing so, it becomes sustainable again. By the time people realize that life has begun again, it has already been happening for some time. Quietly, patiently. One routine, one repaired roof, one shared meal at a time. The world moves forward, not by forgetting what happened, but by carrying it gently and continuing anyway.